Hey friends, it's Simon Hurley from Simon Hurley Create with Ranger, and I'm here at Scrapbook.com, and in this lesson I'm going to be sharing these stamping foam shapes. The really awesome part about these is they've got a frame and also a shape on the inside. So we're going to share some really fun techniques with this and walk you guys through how to make some cards using it. Alright, so the really unique part about this stamping foam is you have this shape. Here this one is a circle, so it's super awesome to kind of create a grounding point on your card. Here it is compared to an A2 size card. You can either put it front and center or kind of create kind of an offset look. There's lots of options with this one. Now the reason you want to have a frame as well is in case if I want to stamp this down on my card and have kind of a border around it, leaving the center circle white so you can add an image right inside there. So there's tons of versatility with both of these shapes, and of course you can kind of pop them in and use them together as well. Alright, so I've popped the circle right back in, and then I'm going to grab a little bit of the mint masking tape. I love this low tack tape to apply this down onto an acrylic block. So I'm going to kind of tape it into little circles and add tape all over the back of the stamping foam to make sure it sticks nicely. Alright, and we have the large Simon Hurley Create acrylic block, which fits on the stamping foam perfectly. So I'm just going to place this down right in the center and stick it down onto the acrylic block. And there we created kind of a handle that's going to be really easy to press against and give lots of pressure to give a nice even image. To create a texture into this stamping foam, I'm using the Playful Petals background stamp from Simon Hurley Create. The really awesome part about some of these background stamps is they have little peel apart pieces in them that pull out, and you can use these separately. So if you want to use this as kind of a focal point on your card, you can totally do that. But today, I'm going to place this right back in. It just fits in like a little puzzle there, and we can use it as a full background stamp. But I wanted to share that because it adds a little bit of creativity if you want to change it up. So I've got my background ready, and now we're going to heat the stamping foam for about 10 to 15 seconds and keep the heat tool moving all around the surface to get it nice and heated up. So once that's ready, we can turn this over and press it down into the background. Now I find with these larger stamping foams, I like to stand up like this and give lots of pressure into the surface there to make sure the whole background is going to transfer nice and evenly. Alright, so then I'm going to lift that off and check out all of the amazing texture you get with this. I love that Playful Petals background stamp and how it'll take this lined image and create the reverse image so we can color this background. Now, I stamped both of these pieces together, but for coloring purposes, I'm going to remove the center circle, but I like that it gives the continuous background all throughout, and we're going to kind of keep that pattern together. Alright, so I'm going to start off by coloring this outline frame. Here I'm using a lighter color called Over the Moon. And I'm just going to do the same thing that we do to apply the ink on the surface. Lightly rub all over instead of doing the tapping motion. So rub to get a nice even coverage of your ink pad on the surface. Alright, and once I've finished that, we can then go into spraying this down. So to get a nice coverage of water and to kind of help this blend and transfer easily, I'm going to just lightly mist this over top of the surface. You don't want too much water because you don't want your surface to kind of puddle and lose any of the detail. Just enough to kind of help it transfer. Then I'm going to take this and place it over top of my card base, kind of line up the edges with the bottom, and then place this down and give it some good pressure to transfer. And the acrylic block really helps in this instance to kind of rock it back and forth and make sure you're getting an even pressure all throughout since there's a hard surface on top of it. Then we can lift that off and check out that background. I love that with this, you get kind of that framed image. And if I wanted to, I could leave this white and add an image on the inside here, and it's going to really highlight that and draw your eye to the center of the card. Now I'm making something very similar to this card where we're creating that yellow background, and then we're going to go in with the second piece and continue the background, but add different colors to highlight this piece. Alright, so to color this little area in, I like to use these little mini detail blending tools by Ranger. These have a little foam on both sides, and they come in a pack of 5 tools, which is super nice. So I'm going to go in here with a little bit of Slippery When Wet, and I'm going to use this yellow color to kind of highlight certain sections of the flowers. And with this, it's really easy to get into these little tiny areas of the stamp and add my ink down onto the surface. It really brings a whole new life to your stamping foam, because then instead of having to color in a stamped image like you usually would with watercolors or something like that, it's really easy to go in with your ink pads and just blend the color on, because these can get into such tight and small spaces. All right, then I'll go in with a little bit of traffic cone. This color is going to kind of help add a little bit of depth and shading to the image. So again, I really love these little tools because now I can go inside of this flower right in the center and add a little bit of darker shading to this image. It makes it really easy to get into these little areas. Then I'll fill in the centers of the flowers with this new color. It's this really great dark brown called Weeping Willow. And I love it. It's going to add tons of depth and dimension into the centers of these flowers. And if you need to get in smaller areas with this, you can just go in with the little edge of this tool and add a little tiny bit of color into those areas. Super simple. For the last little areas, I'm going in with a little bit of overzealous to add some green down onto these leaves. And you're going to notice that the image gets even smaller with these little tiny stems here. Again, just kind of turn your blend tool on its side like this and fill in those tiny little areas just by going right down there. You can see just how small of an area it can fill in, which is really great. What makes the stamping foam so unique is that with this background stamp, there's now kind of a background color that we can add in there too. So I'm going to go in with a little bit of Clear Skies ink, and I love that these are dual-ended, so I can go in with the other side and add a different color down. So I'm going to go in here, apply a little bit of this Clear Skies ink, and now I can go into the background and lightly blend in a little bit of this color. And again, when I want to get into some of these small little detailed areas, I just go to kind of the edge of the tool and get even more into these little areas. And I like to just kind of fill this in with a color. Now this is a step you could completely skip if you want to and just leave it blank with no color in the center. But I like to do this just to add a little bit more depth and dimension to it. All right, now once we're done blending this out, it was really easy to do with all those different colors and the detail blending tools. We can go in with our mister bottle and spray this down lightly with water. Again, it just helps it transfer, but you don't want too much water on the surface there. Now, to line this up back with the design, it's pretty easy to kind of find the image that you want to kind of line it up with. Here I'm going to go with this petal down here, and then you can flip it over, and you can kind of see the design if you look at it from a little bit of an angle like I'm doing here. So just line up that petal and then press it down. And it should line up nice and easily. Now, if you were doing it with the heart stamping foam, you could totally line that image up easily because it's got a couple different points to it. So I wanted to change it up a little bit today though and go with the circle stamping foam. So once I'm done pressing that down, we can then lift that off of the surface and you'll see all of those beautiful, bold, and vibrant colors on there. And I love that this pattern continues throughout, but you get the different colors on the surface to kind of spotlight the center like this. All right, now when it comes to cleaning this off, I'm just going to spray it down with some water. And because my inks react so well with water, this cleans off super easily with just a cloth or a paper towel. And then, again, with the stamping foam, the really awesome part is you can go in with your heat tool and heat this up. It takes about 10 to 15 seconds. And then it'll start returning back to normal and go completely flat so that we can keep reusing it over and over. Check that out. How cool is that? And now I can press this into any other image after I've heated it up and get even more textures to work with. Now to finish this card off, I'm going to use a sentiment from the Sketch Floral stamp set. I love all the amazing illustrated florals in here and the different vases you can put them in. But I also am really obsessed with all of the different sentiments in here. There are some that are a little bit bolder, and then there are some that are kind of handwritten that are going to be a beautiful addition to your card. Here, I'm just going to use the simple sentiment that says love you. So with these photopolymer stamp sets, you just peel off the backing sheet and then you can go in with one of the sentiments to peel it off, and then I'll use an acrylic block to stick it right down onto here, and then we can get into our stamping. This is one of the Simon Hurley Create Sentiment acrylic blocks from the acrylic block set, and it's perfect for these smaller little sentiment images. For this sentiment, I'm going to use a little bit of jet black archival ink to make it stand out beautifully. Press this down, give it a couple taps to ink it up nicely, and then we can stamp it down onto our stark white cardstock. Give it some good pressure so that everything transfers, and then we'll lift it off and you have your beautiful and bold sentiment. I like to fussy cut out my sentiments, so I'm just going to go around this one, and then I'm going to go in with my scissors and just kind of, I leave a little bit of a white border on the edge like this, but then just cut it out really simply. And this one's easy because it's just a couple little rectangles, but by cutting it out closer to the edge, you allow more room for the rest of your card design to shine. All right, so then I'm just going to use a little bit of foam tape to add it down right onto the back of my sentiment. Pop down a couple foam squares. I really like this little dispenser box because they kind of pop out as you pull back the tape. Then I'll peel off the backing sheets, and then we can bring this right onto our card. I'll add it a little bit off-centered like this, right in between some of those flowers, and then place it down. And I love how this card turned out. I love that we were able to use the background stamp and create a continuous pattern all the way across and get this beautiful colored section right in the center using those detail blending tools. All right, so I'm using the same large acrylic block, but this time I'm going to go in using the heart cut stamping foam. Again, leaving both of these pieces together as we stamp the first image if we want to use them both. So press this down onto here so it sticks nicely using that same pieces of mint tape. Then I'm going to use the water marble stamp from Simon Hurley Create, and I'm going to flip this over so we can get our texture all ready. Lift this up, bring in my heat tool, and we can heat this for about 10 to 15 seconds again. Keep the heat tool moving to make sure that your stamping foam doesn't burn and to make sure it's evenly heated across the surface. All right, then once again, we can take this really quickly once it's heated and press it down into our background stamp. And again, using this acrylic block makes it really easy to give lots of pressure in here and make sure that it's all going to transfer. Then we'll lift this off the surface and you can see that really awesome impression that we got with lots of texture from that water marble background stamp. Now let's show how to stamp these. I stamped it both together so we can get textures on each one, but I want to stamp them separately to show you what each frame will look like. So I'll just peel out this heart super easily, and now we have two different stamps we can use. All right, for this background, I'm going to use a couple purples to color this in, starting off with a little bit of sidewalk chalk, which is the lightest purple in our line, and I'm just going to rub this across the surface. And again, I find this kind of circular motion and not lifting and pouncing is going to give you the most even coverage of ink across the surface. So with this one, I want to kind of color the whole background with my lightest color first, and then I'll go in with darker shades. So here I'm using a little bit of triple berry, and I'll go around the edges to give it a little bit of shading and depth and dimension, leaving the center a little bit lighter. Last but not least, I'll finish it off with a little bit of Crown Me, which is our darkest color, and we'll go kind of at the edge with this color and bring a little bit in to add some more shading. All right, then again, if you have any little edges that you want to kind of smooth out using a blending tool, I'm just going in here with the domed blending foam and kind of pouncing those out to make sure that we don't get any marks on our surface and make sure that all the colors are evenly blended. Once that's all inked up, I'll go in and spray that down to make sure the colors blend together nicely. Then I can flip this over and line it up with the bottom edge there, and then lay it down, and it should line up perfectly. Then we can give some good pressure across the surface, make sure that it all transfers. Then we can lift that off and check that out. I love that you get this really beautiful frame of color with all that texture in the background there. Then you can put an image in the center. Here I finished off one of the circle stamping foam cards using the Cool Cat stamp set. I love all the fun and playful images from this set, and it really works great to kind of put one in the center and highlight it nicely like this. All right, then for this one, I'm going to add stripes of color down, starting off with a little bit of rosy cheeks. Then we'll blend in a little bit of a darker reddish kind of pink color. I love this Love Struck color. We'll use kind of the edge of the ink pad to blend this in and not get too much of the color because we're going to add one more down. And here I'm going to use a little bit of Game Over, which is the darkest red color. Add that down, again in a circular motion like this. And then you'll see that kind of in between those, again, there's a little bit of kind of a harsh line. So I'm just going to go in and blend this out. The blending is super easy, and it really gives a nice soft blend in between each one of these colors which you want. Then I'll go with my sprayer and mist that down to make sure that it'll blend nicely and transfer onto my cardstock easily. Bring in a little bit of stark white cardstock, and then we're able to stamp this. You can go kind of off center like this if you want to, but I'll stamp it fully centered so you guys can kind of see the whole design of this heart. Give it some good pressure, and when we lift it off, check that out. I love it. And that little bit of water too, if you add a little more water in there, it's going to create kind of this cool watercolor effect in there. It'll lose some detail, but I love the kind of that painted look too. I also wanted to show how to mix and match patterns so you can create one texture on the frame and a different texture on the insert to create a fun pattern. So with this heart, I'm going to show how to use your photopolymer stamps as well. Here I'm going to use the Sketched Floral stamp set. I love the different kind of hand-drawn florals in here. And I'll pull out 2 of the different flowers that I want to use on today's card. Then, to line it up with this heart, I'm going to place one of my Simon Hurley Create acrylic blocks over top of the heart, so I know the general shape that I'm trying to line this up in. Then we can go in and bring our flowers in, place them right on top of here, and again, just using this as kind of an alignment guide of where we want to place these flowers. Once we've placed them down, we can then lift this off, and we're going to press our heart right into here, and now we can make sure that it's all lined up. Right, so then I'm going to heat my stamping foam for about 10 to 15 seconds until it's nice and hot, and keep the heat tool moving around your heart surface. Then once this is nice and warm, we can go in with our acrylic block and our images, line them up, and stamp them right down into the stamping foam. Give some good pressure, and when we lift that out, you'll see all of that amazing texture from those photopolymer stamps. Now to add some texture to our frame, I want to create a fun striped pattern. So I'm going to use this scoreboard here, which has some nice grooves and indentations in it that are going to create a great striped pattern. So again, look around your house, find other textures, because it doesn't just have to be your crafting supplies. Here we can turn an ordinary object into a striped stamp. So I'm going to go in here with my heat tool, heat this up, and again, keep that heat tool moving all the way around the frame so you get it nice and evenly heated, and you're going to get a nice impression. Once that's good and hot, we can flip it over into our texture, give it some good pressure, and again, this is where I love that larger acrylic block because it's really going to help me get a nice even pressure. And when we lift it off, you'll see those beautiful scoreboard lines have turned this into an awesome stamp. Alright, so to color these stripes, I'm going in with a little bit of Woof, which is kind of this light gray neutral tone, and I'll just bring this on and kind of go in a circular motion all the way across until this is nice and covered. And once you got that covered with ink, we can then go in with our mister and spray this down to make sure it's going to transfer really nicely. Then I'll bring in a piece of my stark white cardstock, and we can line this up by lining up the bottom edge and then placing it down. There we go. Give some good pressure to make sure that it all transfers. And there we have our lined pattern. All right, then I'm going in with a couple of pinks and reds for this heart image. We can go in here and apply this over the top. And then to add a little bit of shading, I'm going in with some Love Struck, which is a little bit darker. And we can go right around the edges to add some depth and dimension to this heart. And then if you have any little harsh marks, you can always go in with your blending tool and blend those out easily. Then we'll go in with our mister again, spray that down so that it's nice and blended. And then to line up this heart, just kind of look above and make sure that it's nice and lined up. Now, if you've heated up your heart several times, it might shrink a little bit from when you first got it out of the package. That's totally normal. So just add a little bit of pressure down here. And you're going to see that if you've used this a couple times, I think I used it 3 times already, it shrinks just a little bit, but you got a nice white border around it then. That's totally normal. I love how this mixed pattern looks by incorporating those flowers and stripes together to create your card. I hope you guys really enjoyed the cards that we created today using the stamping foam. I cannot wait to see what you guys do with all the different textures using your stamp supplies and also things around your house. See you soon!